Hello, good afternoon to all those who are watching this webinar live right now. Esteemed moderator and panelists, my name is Muru Loganathan. I'm with the British High Commission. My daily job is dealing with issues with climate change, wider environmental issues, energy, and for the last couple of years, also dealing with issues with plastics, plastic waste management. So welcome to our webinar titled Plastic Waste Inconvenient through Southeast Asian Region, what should work for us. The webinar, which is part of the Blue Hope campaign organized in conjunction World Oceans Week. I guess everybody knows that the World Oceans Day was on Monday, with partners across various geographical regions, with a clear emphasis and focus on heating the soul and minds of citizens in Southeast Asia. Unsustainable management of plastic waste is an inconvenient truth for all of us. So it's apt that the webinar has been titled along those lines. The webinar is intended to bring a group of expert panelists representing international organizations, research institutions, NGOs, and innovation providers and trainers to dwell on the subject matter in a moderated fashion. I'm pleased to inform that we have an all-female panelist cast as well today. I would like to emphasize that the UK government is active in this space. We are doing some real innovative work, research work, funding programs, many geographical regions in the subject matter. Given next year is also the super year for both climate change and biodiversity, and we should be doing more in protecting our oceans, waterways, coastal, land-based natural resources. And of course, plastics is at the center of this modern environmental problem. Southeast Asia is a primary source and victim of plastic. I call it victim because there are also plastics being imported into these countries from the developed world, which is not fair. Where it is choking seas and threatening ecosystems and livelihoods. Over half of the land-based plastic pollution in our oceans originates from just 5 countries, 4 of which are in Southeast Asia. This pollution has more than an environmental impact. Plastic litter in Asia-Pacific region alone costs tourism, fishing and shipping industries to the tune of US 1.3 billion a year. The debris kill marine life. It breaks down into microparticles that make their way into seafood eaten by humans. In recent years, Southeast Asian nations have acknowledged their roles in the pollution and pledged to curtail it. For example, in 2018, Malaysia announced that it will eliminate single-use plastic by 2030 and publish a roadmap towards achieving the goal. Indonesia has said that it will spend up to US $1 billion a year to reduce its marine waste to 70% between 2017 and 2025. There are more examples of proactive actions in other countries in the region, which we will hear shortly from our assembled panelists. And of course, the ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, also promised in a joint declaration in 2019 that its members will take concrete actions and help one another to prevent and significantly reduce marine debris, including plastic waste. For example, through the possible development of the Asia Regional Plan of Action and guidelines. So there's huge pressure for the region to do more. And there was also a UNEP assessment of plastic waste policies published in 2019 as it determined that limited packaging related policy and weak enforcement are aggravating the problem of plastic pollution in Southeast Asian countries. So the report goes to recommend that harmonized Pan-Asian policies to the whole countries tackling plastic pollution problem. We spoke about the benefit of shared technology hubs in the ASEAN region for recycling and monitoring of trade in plastic waste. And of course, plastic circular economy is the buzzword right now. So Southeast Asia is at the forefront of challenging battle against the plastic problem. So, however, let's be conscious also that plastic is one of the humankind's greatest discovery ever. The recent COVID-19 crisis strengthens importance in the healthcare sector. We're not here to demonize plastic. It's a product and its great value in our daily lives, whether it's past, present, or in the future, but rather focus on how we can manage its uses, viability, and circularity functions much better without damaging our wider environment and health, to close the plastic loop, so as to speak. So I'm excited as much as many of you who are out there watching this live now and here to our fantastic lineup of moderator and panelists who joined us from Malaysia, various parts of Southeast Asia, as well from Australia and the UK. So before I end my note, let me first introduce our expert moderator for the session. Every session needs a good moderator. So I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Sri Umeswara, who's the founder and CEO of ESCAP company and a circular economy and waste management expert consultant. Dr. Sri holds a Master's of Science in Waste Management and Environmental Management and a PhD in Energy and Environment. His company was incorporated in March 2018, pioneer circular economic consultancy and solution provider in Malaysia, bring the digital revolution, waste management, and recycling by creating transparent, accessible, mensural loops. So Dr. Sri also is linked to UNAP, sits as a panel expert. And with that note, I'll now invite Dr. Sri to start the moderation with our esteemed panelists. Thank you very much. Enjoy the session.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muru, for the kind introduction and also the opening. Now, let me move on by introducing our panels who will be joining us today. And we have Ms. Youna, the Senior Research Fellow with the Ocean Law and Policy Program of the Center for International Law, National University of Singapore. Ms. Janet Salem, Economic Affairs Officer, Sustainable Urban Development Section, Environment and Development Division of ESCAP Bangkok. Ms. Jacqueline Chang, Country Representative for Circular Economy Club, Malaysia. Ms. Czarina, National Lead or No Plastic in Nature Initiative and Project Manager on Plastics Smart City, WWF Philippines. Ms. Queen, the Project Manager and Field Activity Lead on Plastic Program, WWF Vietnam. Ms. Kirana, Policy Specialist for Global Plastics Action Partnership, WRI, Indonesia. And Dr. Shima, Managing Director, Value in Enterprise, Director of the Entrepreneurship for Sustainability Program at the Center for Industrial Sustainability, University of Cambridge. Now, while moving on, I would like to re-emphasize the focus on the webinar and the new normal posts on the COVID crisis right now. Plastics as the product of the game-changing discovery, but management of its use after life fate and disposal have been an issue and challenge in many of the countries, especially in Southeast Asia. Plastics caused major environmental problems, land and water pollutions, marine litter. At the same time, plastics is also assisting us in carbon reduction in to certain level. At the same time, we would like to look upon the scale of plastic problem in Southeast Asia, underlying problems and challenges, and we would like to look at the statistics, at the same time initiatives being taken by the government, the NGOs, and the relevant parties, stakeholders in solving or overcoming these problems and challenges. But conscious of the government in the region are waking up and addressing the problem, and they are keen to find a long-term solution to this problem as well. As how Mr. Muru has mentioned, we are not here to demonize plastics. It's a great invention, but at the same time, we have to look upon in a holistic manner on how to manage it well. The better policy management, socializing 6 hours, which is more than 3 hours, is really important, and working principles is needed. Changing the behaviors, better research, innovation landscapes, commercialization of the technologies, investments into collecting and recycling landscapes, making the plastic circular economy work for us, and it is no longer or no more cradle to grave approach. It have to be cradle to cradle approach. So with that, I would like to start with some country views and regional views from our panelists, our fellow panelists. So here, if we can start with Ms. Youna, the plastics research on the landscape of Southeast Asia. What is your new study indicating, or the key highlights on that?
Thank you, Dr. Thuy. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to who's with us. Unfortunately, we can't see you, but we can only imagine that you're not very far. So the topic of plastic is really complex, and marine plastic, as what was said just before, we don't want to demonize it. Some do. Others say that it's very useful. The difficulty is that we are playing in a really complex setup because of the diversity of players. And so what our research which we have conducted for the last 2 years at the National University of Singapore with the British High Commission at the beginning, and then we continued on with UNEP and COPSI in particular. What we found is the first message really is a bit of a disconnect between what the science knows and what we fear. And there's a high level of scientific uncertainty as to what the true impact is. So whereas we want to close the tap, and we're very aware that we are certainly discharging too much plastic in the marine environment, we don't exactly know how much. We don't exactly know what the true impact is, what is the impact. We know we have a lot of anecdotal evidence of impact. We know that we find a lot everywhere, yet there is a scientific uncertainty as to what the health impact is, whether on human or whether on marine ecosystem. And that disconnect between the fact that we want to act, but we're not quite sure what the impact is creating a lot of discussions that with people with very diagonally opposite views, and it's making action really difficult. And that's, I think, from a scientific perspective, it's a really important reality to see. And so in Southeast Asia, we've done a lot of progress on understanding how much plastic we have where, and what type of plastic, so which polymer, where does it accumulate, and etc. But we still have a long way to go. And so what we have found, one of the exercises we went into was really to understand the lay of the land. So who are the players in that discussions on plastic? And here we're talking about the topic of this seminar is really the circular economy. And I'm talking about the science and action with governments. But in order to motivate that circular economy and ensure that these circular economy processes are fully at play, you need the governments to be on board with them fully, and then you need the science to actually support it. And so, and what we have found is, in addition to this disconnect between the science and what some would want in terms of establishing the circular economy, the players are extremely fragmented, and there are many of them. And so within government, and that will be really my main point before we move on to other people having other views. And I'd like to share with you I'll share one slide to show the way governments are trying to organize themselves in Southeast Asia. And when we're looking at work on marine plastic and regulating and policy making for marine plastics in Southeast Asia, you realize that it is a very complex group of states that are working in different fora. And so this is what I would like to show you. So what you can see here is these all this Venn diagram is showing you a lot of different bodies. And so in the middle here, when we're looking at Southeast Asia, well, in green, you have the ASEAN discussions. And the ASEAN discussions is actually, and within the ASEAN, we've had the framework of action on marine debris, which is looking at marine plastics. But then you also have the ASEAN +3 discussions, which is extending it to China, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. And then you have the East Asia Summit discussions, where there's also been declarations and statement of leaders on combating marine plastics. And within that, you have, in light blue, you have the COPSI, the coordinating bodies of the seas of East Asia under Youna, which is yet a different group of states. It's not quite the ASEAN +3. It is not quite the ASEAN. And then over all of that, you have the APEC discussion, which is a lot wider. And so in each of those group of states, when you have intergovernmental meetings, you do not have the same states around the table. All of them include Southeast Asia, and they are all trying to set up a roadmap in order to improve the situations with the discharge of marine plastics. So this was just a point, the first point I wanted to make, which is the complexity of the land. And it doesn't mean that those bodies are not trying to work together. They are, but it is difficult when you think about it. Obviously, it is difficult to have all of those different conversations happening in the same time. So I think that's enough of a presentation of where we come from, and I'll look forward to the discussion.
All right, Youna, just like to highlight, or perhaps you can share that how strong is the sustainable policy angles in this research? What are the major gaps, opportunities that you look at?
So the research that we've been doing does not focus on so much on the upstream processes. So we don't really look at we've looked at sentiment as in social behavior and how much study there was in understanding the readiness of communities to change. But there is very little research on that topic. When you start looking at the economic processes, there's also quite little. So we did dig, but we didn't find very much. So where we found there's the start of research is more on the downstream part, which is the impact. So from the moment the litter reaches the marine environment. So starting from leakages, understanding leakages and pathways and transport and fate. And what we see there is that there are a lot of gaps, but the main one, and those in our recommendations, the understanding of the magnitude of the risk. So we do not have enough yet in terms of hotspot. Indonesia has started doing a fair bit of work on that with the World Bank at the initiative on identifying hotspots. I mean, places where marine debris are known to accumulate, and therefore action can be taken locally in order to maybe clean up in some places. In others, it would be to then backtrack where it might be coming from to act on those specific sources that link to particular accumulation. But then we'd have to define what is a hotspot. How do you define a hotspot? And so there's a number of discussions that still need to be refined. But all of these fora that I mentioned before, we're all working on that. So I think we're going to get there. It's just, this is one of the lines of work. Another big gap is understanding what plastic is, what biodegradability means. So all these new plastic, plant-based plastic, these new material, they're creating new streams of waste. We're not necessarily equipped to deal with those. So this is more that's arriving in the marine environment. Then all plastic are not born equal. So PET is not like PVC in terms of impact at all. And there's a lot of study that's been done on PVC, yet what we find in the marine environment is PET, which is polyethylene. So that's what the plastic bottles are made, the water bottles are made of. So it's quite interesting because that's actually the easiest to recycle, and the one for which we have recycling processes in place and etc. And yet it seems to be the one that we find the most of in very, very small particulates in the marine environment. So refining to what is the type of polymer we find, in what size, in what shape, where, and how it accumulates. So that's sort of the level, the granularity that we didn't have before, that we finally getting into. How is it moving? So yes, it is transboundary, of course, but which, where, and how, and what species are affected? Some are affected by much more than others. So I think it's really the granularity that's lacking, and that's what we're highlighting. And so we need regional baselines and regional monitoring. And that also is not a new topic. We've been discussing it for the last 2 years, but it's one thing to talk about it. There's lots of different methodologies flying around, so it will take time, but there's many of us are working on it. And so I'm quite hopeful that we'll get there. And it's quite, when we found that there were 371 technical articles in the region, we were quite satisfied because when you look at publications around the world, there's not so many names from the region very often. Well, actually, it's not quite representative because we've been busy bees. And so that's I think, I'm not sure whether it fully answers your question.
Yeah, okay. We actually got your points, and thanks for that. Okay, I would like to move on to Dr. Shima on how do we connect research to sustainable product design, to commercialization and consumerism, and start the loop of collection, recycling, and reproducing.
Oh, that's quite a question. Fantastic question. You're absolutely right. We have such a wealth of knowledge and competences within the research community, but that typically stays within the research community. And so building infrastructure and support networks that can allow these researchers to think about what in the UK we call routes to impact. I don't know whether that translates quite well across regions, but it really is looking at your knowledge, and particularly if you've got an invention, how do you actually get it into the hands of those who can use it and create an impact, both social and environmental? And whereas researchers understand this in principle, when it comes to actually putting in place this routes to impact, it's quite difficult and the resources aren't necessarily there. There's been an estimate that it takes about 3 times as much funding as what went into the research to actually get it commercialized and moving down the routes to impact, to actually realize it in the real world. So several things need to be in place. One of the activities is that we lead, which is the Venture School, is really about training these researchers. Primarily, and I don't know whether this might be surprising, is to give them confidence. Because no matter how much training you can give, and in the end you have limited time, but when you give someone the confidence that they can do something, and it is something they want to do, they will then go on to find the resources and further knowledge as and when they need it. So training and confidence is one. The other is infrastructure within the universities around knowledge and expertise for tech transfer, as well as a network within the community. And it can be small and can start to grow, of other entrepreneurs, the funding communities, local councils and policy that come together that nurture these nascent ideas and new ventures and projects.
Okay. Thanks for that sharing. Grateful for your thought. And Ms. Janet, we would like to hear from where are the technical and innovation aspects of these plastics landscape in terms of readiness, opportunities and challenges?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I mean, I think Shima brought up a few good points. There are really good innovations in this field, and there are entrepreneurs and scientists who have the potential to become entrepreneurs who are working in this field. But what we say is that you need a lot of technology, and possibly technology policy in the countries in Southeast Asia could be used and leveraged to address the plastics problem. There are a few different areas. One actually that Youna mentioned is there's so many different types of plastics, the bio-based ones, the marine degradable, compostable, there's, industrial compostable. And if we don't put them in the right waste stream, they can actually end up contaminating our recycling efforts, which is a big problem, and that'll lose money. So one of the areas that is of interest on the technology side is looking at machine vision and spectroscopy. So basically creating a digital signature on plastics and plastic products so that the robots who are going to be handling these materials in the recycling sector in the future can actually visually identify them, not just based on what they look like, but by a special little code. There are a few other areas of technology that show promise. One is using sort of decentralized ledgers like blockchain. So we see Plastic Bank, which is active in Southeast Asia, that uses blockchain to incentivize informal waste pickers to collect the plastic waste and also to sort it very well so that it can be used as a secondary product rather than mixed with lots of different types of waste where the bottle is still on the cap is still on the bottle, etc. There are a few other ones. I think the other one that's kind of interesting is using artificial intelligence and machine learning in order to design these plastic materials so that they have the technical specifications that product designers need for, electronics or for disposables, etc. But that they also have the technical specifications for recyclability or for compostability or the other kinds of sustainability characteristics. Now, there's so many different formulas that could be used and tested, and machine learning can help us narrow down the field so that we take a few polymer formulas and then test those. Lastly, what we're working on at the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, we're working on reducing plastic going to the oceans from cities using satellite data and artificial intelligence to be able to monitor and measure the plastic that is going into the rivers. So this is very much a topic for the digital technology community to come forth with solutions. I will just say that COVID has probably prompted a bit of a surge in this kind of work because it is increasing the amount of plastic waste in Southeast Asia. There are a few drivers for this. One is hygiene concerns due to COVID are increasing the demand and use for single-use plastics. So we even see some retail chains that are not encouraging customers to come with their own bag, and some cafes that don't allow you to bring your own cup. So a lot of the headway that we've made on the reuse behaviour is now really backtracking. Secondly, because people are flying less and driving less, the oil price has gone down, which makes plastic cheaper, or at least it creates a signal to the market that single-use plastics are still the cheaper way to go. And if we look at the cost of recycling and reuse, there's such a logistical overhead to that has a cost. So it's very difficult to compete with the cheap oil from plastic. Another problem is that policy attention is obviously now fully on COVID responses. So it's very difficult for governments to make that push on plastic that we were seeing in 2019. a couple of promising, so there's very much a need to address this problem because it is all signs are going up. Some potential promising drivers, I think, is that people are seeing images on social media of what the environment looks like when it bounces back from all this economic activity, and seeing nature come back and clean waters and blue skies, I think is showing people what things could look like if we manage them properly. And one last driver that could possibly be leveraged in the right direction is that trade restrictions are making it difficult for countries to import single-use plastic products. So countries like Singapore that may not be able to bring in all those single-use plastic bags, etc. They may have more of an interest in the reusable and share economy systems that can enable reductions in plastic waste.
Great. Thank you, Janet, for your thoughts and that great for wonderful sharing of that. Just like to re-emphasize over here, or perhaps to highlight some of your points, whereby yes, due to hygiene, where the single-use plastics now have increased as well back again in terms of medical PPEs, masks, or any other equipment-wise. And at the same time, you highlighted that the virgin plastics are now much more cheaper compared to the recycled material or recycled resins that are being used into products. But then how do we see the challenge here is, I personally have experienced that the difficulty in recycling plastics, or the logistics part of it, is actually the gap that between the post-consumer and towards the recycling technology. If that gap can be closed as our closed loop, then the flow is going to be much more easier comparatively, whether it is going to be virgin or recycled material later part. But there are some companies, there are some industries, or even countries have came out with legislation or also pledged to use certain percentage of recycled content in their products. So therefore, I fully support, and I also need your thoughts on this, whereby they should be carrying on or continuing with those activities.
Yeah, if I were a venture capitalist, I would invest in the reverse logistics, getting all those valuable resources out of households and back into the material sector where they're actually valuable. From a policy perspective, what's worked well for aluminium is a deposit refund, basically a refund system. So putting a good price on it. Like Youna said, PET is so recycled into the ocean to act, then I think you're going to wait too long. So there needs to be some incentive or some disincentive, I would say, also to let that precious plastic go to waste.
Thank you, Janet. Dr. Shima, as an experienced trainer on the building of innovative thoughts and entrepreneurial capacity, give us some insights that into the plastics world along these lines, that any relevance that you can share specifically for the Southeast Asia region.
So treading carefully here, because some things are in the works, but I think some of the exciting innovations in this space that are being commercialized are in the alternative plastics. So while I completely support the notion of investing in infrastructure and dealing with the plastics, I mean, again, coming from the business side, the notion that we have this valuable resource that goes to waste is ludicrous. So bringing that back in and all these notions of circularity notwithstanding, I support that. I'm adding, it's not an instead, but an and. A parallel stream that's really exciting is in the alternative packaging and materials, particularly addressing all the criticisms that are at the moment against all the biodegradable, which in fact is a little bit of a con, because they're not typically biodegradable under natural environmental conditions. So the exciting work now is to make biodegradable materials that do biodegrade in nature. And I'm working with a company and mentoring them at the moment that is producing that type of plastic. And I think that's a very exciting innovation. But there's several others there. And it's going to be a race to the market here, because everybody now understands what's needed and who's going to get there first. Another one, and that started, it came out of one of our People, Plastics and Our Planet Venture schools, is looking at lab plastics, an often overlooked, under-researched area, which of course has suddenly now been completely highlighted with the COVID situation, because now we're seeing the masks, the gloves, but actually the plastics in the lab with disposable films, disposable pipettes. There is so much plastics within our scientific community, not just the medical one, that was another area where we have a group that's supported by the Circular Plastics Network that actually is looking at how do they help scientists reduce the plastics. And they've got some really interesting ideas there of reducing up to 80% of scientific waste. So I think those are two major areas that we could see having a very high impact and impacting what ends up in our oceans, either by what ends up is biodegradable at environmental temperatures and in seawater, and the other one is just cutting down what's coming out of our scientific communities, which is a major source of plastic.
Yeah, great. You did mention about this buzzword, which is greenwashing, and that has been, moving out a lot from the Western world, from the Eastern world, and now even in Southeast Asia and so forth. And as you mentioned, that how do we overcome this? How do the industry, the policymakers, even the consumers have to look into the greenwashing? Is there any legislation that has encountered such kind of greenwashing method or greenwashing products?
Legislation.
Or any regulation that has been regulating?
It's hard. It's quite hard to deal with this at a regulatory perspective, but there are definitely people on the panel who are more equipped to talk about policy. But one of the things about policy, if you are putting the barriers and the disincentive, business is very good at finding the loopholes or coming right up to or over the barrier. So actually having more positive incentives tends to be more effective. And we've seen that in not just in plastics, but in environmental issues more broadly. So my research background area is looking at environmental strategy in businesses. And so finding reasons and a business case for businesses to engage tends to be more fruitful than policy disincentives. And so here, consumers' critical engagement with business is really important for consumers to be able to look at something and say, you business, that is not an appropriate product, ingredients, packaging. That's really important, because a lot of the times I speak to businesses and they say, I don't think the customer cares. Yeah, they're interested, but they don't vote with their buying power. They're not going to boycott my product. They want it, it's cheap, or so on. So I think that's a really important one. But the other one is to highlight the valuable resource side of it. Because as much as we think that businesses are rational, we must remember that there is no such thing as a business. It is a collection of people And these people are overworked, they have their targets, they're rushing around, and they sometimes miss the obvious. And bringing it back to you're actually wasting your resources. You could be cutting your costs, you could be increasing your profits, you're building your brand image, you're building customer loyalty. It's far more of an attractive proposition for business.
Totally agree to that. Thank you. All right, let's look at the value of targeted and localized actions, starting out with Jacqueline, Miss Jacqueline from Malaysia, and also Queen and Kirana from Indonesia, Queen from Vietnam, and the Philippines. Czarina from Philippines will be sharing specific cases or case studies from your specific region and localized action from your own country. Miss Jacqueline.
Okay. What do you do that for? Oh my God. Shit.
Perhaps, Ms. Queen, that you can share your views from Vietnam.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Queen from Vietnam and would like to share with you on the situation of the plastic waste in Vietnam and also some case study in Phu Quoc Islands where I worked for last year. First, I would like to share with you an overview of the waste management in Vietnam. So with the average generated amount of waste is 61,600 tons per day. So the total amount of domestic solid waste in Vietnam per year is almost 31 million tons. So, but the collection rate now in 2008, collection rate in 2018 just 77%. So it means that we have still have the 23% of the domestic solid waste unmanaged. That's why we include in within the domestic solid waste amounts, we have around 3 million tons of 3.6 million tons of plastics generated per year, plastic waste generated per year, and the liquid rate of the plastic waste into the water body and the ocean body is more than 0.8 million tons per year. So within we saw in the plastic waste management, we just have around 10 or 15, between 10 and 15% of plastic waste reused and recycled. And the remain is still landfill, is still buried in the landfill. So that's we have almost 50% of the waste with the 50% of the waste are unmanaged, both the open dumping and the illegal discharge. This is the overviews of the plastic waste. We have for the Vietnam, the Vietnam government have addressed the plastic waste problem and also the marine plastic litter as well. And in 2019, the Prime Minister has called for the collective action to combat the plastic waste, and later on, the Ministry, the Prime Minister have promulgated the new National Action Plan for plastic marine plastic waste management, and with the national targeted in the National Action Plan is that by 2015 the country will reduce the 50% of the plastic waste in marine bodies, and by 2030 the country will reduce 55% of the plastic waste in the marine body and collect 100% of the fishing gear lost it and abandoned in the marine environment. So, and also by 2030, the government also commit to eliminate 100% of single-use plastics and non-biodegradable plastic bags. That is the strong commitment from the government authorities to combat with the plastic waste management in Vietnam, the marine plastic waste management in Vietnam. And now the government also under revise for the new law on the environmental protection, and they have some chapter regarding to the waste management and the specific article that support to the circular economy. They also have some article to regulate some regulation on the EPR. And after the new law is promulgated, there will be many regulation will be developed and promulgated. That's maybe new decrees to detail the law, and the new circular and guidelines, and improve the environmental standard and requirement to adapt the new law. So one specific article, one specific point in the new law regarding to the new system of waste management is that they will calculate the collection fee for the households based on the generated amount, and then they encourage the household and the generation source to separate the waste into the 5 types. The first one is the recyclable. The second one is the compostable and the food waste. The third one is the hazardous. The fourth one is the bulky waste, and the last one is the other solid waste. With that, those new points in the law on the environment protection, we have the leverage for the provincial and provincial local authority to develop their own action plan, and also their own localize their regulation to adapt with the new law and to combat with the plastic waste. So that is the overviews of the waste management and the policies of the Vietnam. And now I would like to talk with you more about a case study of Phu Quoc Islands, where I worked for a year. So maybe you have you have heard about the Phu Quoc Islands. Is one of the famous tourist tourist attraction areas. But maybe you don't know that it's just a district in the administrative system. So with the districts, but they generate around 150 tons per day of the solid waste. So they have a face the same pressure with the city in terms of the waste management, without any reliable treatment facility. So they have 6 open dumping only. That now to take care of the generated waste every day on the islands, and with the population of the 145,000 inhabitants and the 2.5 million tourists per year. So it means that they have to face very high pressures of the waste management on the islands. Meanwhile, without the reliable facility for treatment, on the way just collected and dumped in the open sites. Looking into the composition of the waste on the islands, we found that there have around 32 tons of the waste is plastic. Every day, the islands generated 32 tons of the plastic, and 1/3 of them are leached into the ocean. Without the good management, without the sound management of without the sound management of the waste facility and collection. Recognize that problem. So the WWF have implemented the first project related to the plastic on the islands since 2018, and we designed the project framework to work with the multi-stakeholder, with the local authority, with the business, with the public communities, and with the objective that we have to advocate the local authority to develop and to issue a new regulation on the plastic waste management, or specifically, or the solid waste management in general. And we also work with the business, especially for the hospitality sector, to engage them into the plastic reduction commitment. And we do the waste, the awareness raising with the public, the community, the local resident, the school as well. But you can see that you can understand that every starting point still have a lot of challenge. We have the first challenge is about I have mentioned is unreliable facility, that we cannot have the sound treatment for the waste collected. The second one is the island also, not only from the domestic phase, the problem with not only for the domestic waste, but also the marine plastic wash up on the beach every year for the 2 seasonal site. We also have the challenge when at the beginning of the project to get the local authority on board with us. So we take we took 1 year to get them actually on board with us. Just right after the Prime Minister have called for the collection for the collective action in 2019, and then we have the strong commitment with the local authority. They have getting on board and work collaborated most closely with us to develop the action plan, and also they now they can collaborate with us for every kind of the project activity. So that's the one of the impact from the national strategy, national policy to the local one.
Great, Ms. Queen, thank you very much for your sharing and wonderful experience on the case studies from Vietnam. I would like to call upon Ms. Kirana from Indonesia, where we have heard from the industry players as well. There's so much of programs are being undertaken or policies are being undertaken now in Indonesia. Perhaps you could share some of those.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sri, for the time. So I would like to briefly give some contents. Coming from the largest archipelagic nation in the world, we are very blessed that the country has enormous potential in terms of the marine resources. But as we know, the country also facing the big challenge, which is marine pollution. Back in 2015, actually, there's two international publication that was first mentioned Indonesia as the second largest marine debris polluter in the world. And the second research was saying that there are microplastic in the fish in the traditional market in Indonesia. So coming from in 2015, it became a wake-up call for the government of Indonesia to really do the urgent action. So they're starting to collect different stakeholders from the academic, business sector, private industry, and different government. And they start to create what they call the National Action Plan. And in Indonesia itself right now, with my current work under the National Plastic Action Partnership, we work closely with the government under the coordinating Ministry of Maritime Affairs. And we did the study within the World Bank and the LIPI. LIPI is the leading science agency in Indonesia. And we found out that the study that we are just currently published in Indonesia itself, we have 6.8 million tons of plastic waste every year, and it may growing 5% annually. And from that record, actually 39% of plastic waste is collected, and there are 61% not collected. So it's a huge homework for Indonesia, but there's so under our study we divide it into 4 archetypes, because as we know, Indonesia is a huge country, 18,000 island with 270 million of people. So we divided the study within 4 archetypes of geography landscape, which is a medium, like mega cities like Greater Jakarta, and then medium area, as well as a rural and remote area. And we found out, based on Indonesia case, the medium and rural area are responsible for 72% of mismanaged waste. So although like a big city like Jakarta may each person generate more plastic waste per person, but they have more capacity to collect their waste compared with the people in medium and rural area, because most of them, they don't have choice, so either to burn or dump their waste. So but maybe just to give progress what the government of Indonesia also doing. So there's a few maybe I would just to draw like 5 main issue, like how to improve the solid waste management. And right now there are 17 sites in 8 cities that already do the project implementation. And then do this solid waste management. And then in terms of waste management in harbor or port, the government of Indonesia already developed reception facilities, and also each vessel has to collecting waste in coastal water. And also for the marine tourism destination, right now the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy already published a decree on management of plastic waste in tourism destination, as well as in the energy and in terms of this COVID, they are now trying to be more innovative to find out how we can still get data, although we may have to delay to going to the field. And right now with the National Plastic Action Partnership, we really engage closely with different stakeholders as well. So I hope that's answered the question of the national landscape of waste management in Indonesia. Back to you, Dr. Sri.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the sharing. And Czarina from Philippines.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to share about the Philippine landscape in terms of solid waste management. So I understand from what Youna mentioned a while ago, the importance of data. And this is something that WWF really commissioned into. That's why we commissioned a study actually this year, and we consulted with a local partner, AMH Philippines, to create this first materials flow analysis at the national level. And our preliminary results, it showed that in the Philippines we generate around 2,150,000 tons annually, wherein 35% are leaked into the environment. So most of this leakage in terms of types are mostly single-use plastics and mostly bags and also sachets. And out of this annual plastic consumption in the country, we also saw that the study showed that the Philippines has a 9% recycling rate in terms of plastics, most of which cover PET, HDPE rigid, and also PP. But these are limited to junk shop availability. So in the Philippines, there are a lot of junk shops wherein they really collect the high value waste. So that is one of the major findings of that particular study, that only the high value plastics are collected. And these are collected, most of these are collected by the informal waste sector, which is a very important sector in discussing the plastic pollution issue. So just to give you a preview on what are the initiatives that are being done in the Philippines. So firstly, it's gaining traction, I must say. There are a lot of NGOs right now, a lot of LGUs, and a lot of people are really conscious about the problem in the Philippines. At the local level, a lot are, most cities are investing on waste management, but also there are this, what we call waste reduction. So for us, well, personally, I would call it waste reduction and management system. So there are about 30% of all the Philippine cities and municipalities have submitted or have passed a policy wherein they regulate or they ban single-use plastics, particularly or most especially plastic bags. So only 30%, but that's already promising in our country. And then next one is, I think the local government units or the cities and municipalities are governed by an almost 2-decade old national law, which is Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000, which is again is important because it sort of pushed or really mandated the different cities to do something. So for example, they are mandated to create a 10-year solid they need to achieve at least 25% waste diversion, meaning they would have to divert or reduce the volume of plastics that are being brought to the landfill. So it's very important because in the Philippines, sanitary landfills is very difficult to establish and actually very expensive. So it's very important that waste diversion gets increased, and that's what that is being mandated by RA 9003. Now, at the national level, on top of this RA 9003 implementation, we have already bills being filed in the House of Representatives and the Senate regarding the ban or regulation of single-use plastics. There are also coordination or like passing of bills related to extended producer responsibility. And I think this is something that we should be exploring in the region, extended producer responsibility, wherein we put accountability to the producers. At the national level, so like I think what Kirana mentioned a while ago, there's also this push. The Philippine government through the Department of Environment and Natural Resources is currently drafting a national plan of action. So I guess that is something that is really similar with all the presenters. Is that we are currently drafting it so that we have so that we have a framework to follow, and we would see where the Philippine government or the Philippines sees the direction in terms of addressing the plastic pollution issue. So but the Philippines, it's not just about, we don't see it, well, with WWF, we don't see it as a local or a national level approach, but we also need to see it as at a regional and global approach. So the Philippine government has also been active in terms of pushing for the global treaty on marine plastic pollution. And so there, right now, there, other regions have pledged already their support for the global treaty. And I think this is something that Southeast Asia or the region should be focusing on. Other regional declarations were made by the Nordic countries, the Caribbean, the Pacific, and Africa. So I think the region should really move forward in submitting such declaration. And also, I think something noteworthy is that the Philippines, together with Indonesia, are one of the co-founding members of the group of friends combating marine plastic pollution. So this was launched last Monday, so during the World Oceans Day, wherein they look at the plastic pollution issue or marine plastic pollution not just at the national level or country level, but also as at the global level. So I think in terms of the Philippine government implementation or addressing for plastic pollution issue, we're gaining traction, and hopefully I think it was Janet who mentioned a while ago that hopefully the COVID situation will not really stop or like break the momentum that these initiatives have been implemented or have been gaining for the past few years. So yeah, that's it for Philippines.
Great. Thank you very much, Czarina, for your sharing from Philippines. Now let's come back to Malaysia. Jacqueline.
Hi, Dr. Sri. Thanks for having me here today. It's been a really good discussion so far with a lot of sharing from the region as well as the various countries. But I would like to share something that transpired last year during the Circular Cities Week of 2019 that was first launched in Malaysia. The case study that I want to really share with everyone today is really on the tech loop. During the Circular Cities Week, it was a collaboration with 80 cities where KL and PJ was also involved. And one of the top sectors that we really zoomed in was the fashion and textiles. The top challenge identified was that there is an increasing trend of online shopping, and it's associated with packaging like plastic wrapping and boxes. However, a top opportunity hasn't really been tapped into in Malaysia as well as the other countries in ASEAN, and that is on reusable packaging. So I would like to share one case study on the tech loop for consideration of all the e-commerce players in Malaysia and ASEAN, how they could start adopting reusable packaging and replacing single-use plastics packaging to transport the customers' products. So today I would like to share on the circular value proposition, a circular packaging business model for consideration of all the e-commerce players that we have started to dialogue with, and to invite them to create a blue ocean shift and a new value cost frontier by pursuing differentiation, i.e. Circular packaging, as well as low cost simultaneously, whereby they can reduce sourcing of new materials such as plastic packaging. And this in itself would open up a new value cost frontier for their companies. And this model breaks their value cost trade-off when they are stuck in a market competing space. And they start creating what we call a market creating space, and also to communicate a very key message to all the potential consumers out there is that the value they deliver today drives buyer behavior, which determines the future growth prospects. So the case study that we will be sharing with the Malaysian e-commerce players is the how they can actually replace the plastic packaging with a circular packaging, applying the reuse and redistributes cycle in the tech loop of the butterfly diagram. This product was created in 2011, and it encourages the strategies of reuse as many times as possible and to redistribute technical products to current or new users. This cycle encourages sharing, renting, and reselling of products amongst other users to prevent the need to create new plastic products as packaging. So the case study I would like to really focus on is the reuse loop that has been implemented successfully by Repack. Repack is a reusable and returnable packaging developed by a Finnish startup. And this is how it works. Say you buy a pair of shoes and that comes in a Repack package. Once you receive the shoes, you take them out from its packaging, you fold the package and post it back to Repack to use it again with another consumer. The package posting back to Repack is prepaid by the company, so the consumer only has to leave it in the mail, and the package is durable and will last about a minimum of 20 uses until it needs repair. Even when accounting for the logistics of returning the package to the company, the system has proven to have reduced carbon emissions by 75% if we compare it with using 20 new plastic packages. Singapore is already working with the Circular Economy Club in Malaysia, as well as my colleague in Singapore, on a version that we hope will be applicable for both Malaysia and Singapore with a very specific e-commerce player. So, I hope everyone will watch out and keep their eyes and ears open for this space. And hopefully, this would transpire into something good because it focuses on the upstream part of the plastic value chain. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you for that sharing. And I believe Repack would create a better impact in reducing carbon emission and also the wastages of single-use packaging. Back to Youna. Youna, the value of localized research versus national and regional or international research type of frameworks, the problems are actually similar between this everywhere, or even for Southeast Asia. Now, the problems are similar, but what will work for Southeast Asia region based on your recent study or experience within the region?
Thank you for this question. Actually, that's and it's very interesting in light of what was just shared, in particular by our colleagues from Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam in particular, as they highlighted the waste management issues, and they all mentioned that collection is a lot less than what needs to be done. And I think that's something, so it's as if we have two discussions that are happening in parallel that are necessary, but one is on the circular economy, and it's very much about reuse new materials, so closing the loop on that side. The thing is that this discussion does not close the tap of input into the marine environment. And this other discussion, which is a waste management discussion, is one which is of greater concern in developing countries because there are less means for collection and treatment of waste. And I think that's where, if we are behind somewhere, it's in the region, it's there. And so there was a comment I saw about the fact that businesses, discussion with businesses might be more useful than with governments, but businesses are very a critical partner and can indeed move the circular discussion, the circular economy discussion much further and faster. But government are the one that have the keys in waste management, because no one wants to look after waste management, and unfortunately, there's no. It's a side effect of the market, and no one wants to look after it, so it ends up falling onto government's responsibility. So I think that's one of the very specific issue faced by the region, which is the hardest, and it's stopping input into the marine environment. So collection is one thing, but even once you've collected, where do you put the waste? Well, in landfills, when you start looking at satellite images, you see that a lot of those landfills are along rivers, or not that far from rivers, or even by the coast. And every heavy rain, which is just about every day, are going to actually wash it into the as runoffs into water bodies that will end up into the oceans. So that's where I think we must not forget that this is the most pressing issue in parallel. So there's lots of work that needs to happen in different fora, and that's why it's so complex, because we have to keep talking to each other. But we need the circular economy discussions to push forward with new products and new technologies, and blockchain is very promising, and AI is very promising, and all of these. And then parallel to that, we need the very basic, maybe, but let's pick up the rubbish and let's make sure that it doesn't go. So it's really a complex discussion. And so in the science, we're trying to support all these work streams. So there's a lot, and there's really a lot of them. I don't know if this is answering your question, but I think it's back to the reality, which is...
All right, I totally agree with you on that, because it has to be throughout the supply chain. It cannot be only on the end part of it. On one side, we are cleaning up. At the same time, we also need to look into the innovative part of the production and circular economy or eco-innovation and kind of thing on those materials and so on. Thanks for that, Youna. Dr. Shima, back to you. What are your thoughts on developing indigenous innovations and entrepreneurship? Any specific case studies that you could share?
So, yeah, absolutely. I think indigenous innovations, kind of development of local ecosystems is absolutely key. Because while plastics is a global problem and certainly transboundary, the solutions are context specific and need to be embedded in actual communities and use, well, the ideas need to come from actual people that have their cultural context and will be used by people again with the same or different culture. So it's got to be locally embedded. The local resources also need to come into it. So when we were in Malaysia doing the People Plastics and Our Planet Venture School last year, what was interesting was how both the local and authorities and government came together with civil society, entrepreneurs, the investors, to come up with ideas that would work in that context. And some of the ideas that came out were around education and being far more creative. It wasn't about a curriculum that went into schools, but it was finding ways to engage individual citizens, children and adults, to actually empower them to take actions. We saw the research community coming again with the entrepreneurs and the investors to design a new material that could be used by multinational businesses to replace the pesky plastic layers that are in sanitary products and diapers, for example. That if we see that going onto the market, that is both locally inspired but globally impactful. And that's what we want to see. Innovations that are context specific, but that actually also have a potential for a global scale.
Yeah. Janet, would you like to share on the ESCAP closing the plastics loop program in Southeast Asia, working with the cities? And what are the program intends to achieve in these cities, actually?
Yeah, sure. Maybe first I wanted to reflect on what Shima was saying about these new businesses and Jacqueline about reusable products, because I think there's still a role for us in the public sector to support them a little bit more. These are startups and entrepreneurs that are bringing in new business models, especially around reusable, let's say, sanitary pads. They have to fight social norms. They can come up with a great product, but they also then have to overcome social norms. And there's actually a lot that we can do in the public sector to provide some support for them, especially when it comes to our own procurement. If we have some public procurement related to, let's say, catering or water bottles or whatever it is, or let's say there's government programs that purchase hygiene products for women and girls, I think there's still a space to provide that push for entrepreneurs so that they can get some support. And I also think that particularly in the reusable cup share, reusable female hygiene products, there's also very much space to maybe support coalitions so that these entrepreneurs can meet each other pre-competitively and share their struggles, share their challenges. Right now in COVID, if you're a cup share startup or reusable packaging for food delivery, it's very, very difficult to get some traction and to survive this period. I think they need some support because they are supporting our public goals. So that's, I think, one key thing that I would certainly advocate to any government staff that are interested in preventing plastic waste. Entrepreneurs need help. But coming back to my project on closing the loop, so what we want to do is we want to work with city-level local governments in Southeast Asia. We want to help them set up a baseline to make sure they have really good methodologies to measure how much plastic leakage there is going into urban waterways that will go into the ocean. And then we're working with the technology sector to establish a digital tool so that they can monitor and measure this plastic waste easily and in an automated way over time, so they get some feedback on whether their policies and their measures are working without having to manually go and measure these things. Then after the first phase, then we would use this data from the baseline and also this sort of data coming in from the digital tool to boost their own policy responses at the local level, so they can target, like which products is it coming out, where are these leakage points, where is the formal dumping, and they can then adjust their policies with this evidence base. So our 4 cities are Da Nang in Vietnam, Surabaya in Indonesia, Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and Nakhon Si Thammarat in Thailand.
Okay, great. So we have another 20 minutes to go. Now let's come to the final round here. We are going to move on to the plastics or circular plastics economy. Starting off with Czarina on the extended producer's responsibility on the EPR. Could you share what is actually happening in Philippines on the EPR?
So as mentioned a while ago by Shima, sometimes data is really needed. Not sometimes. Data is really needed in terms of really coming up with policies and with initiatives. So when last year we reached out to different stakeholders, we reached out to different high-level policymakers to push for EPR to provide a legal framework for EPR, right? But most of them shared with us that they need data. So they need proof that EPR is really implemented mostly on the Western countries, but they want to see it as a scheme that would be effective in Southeast Asia, particularly in the Philippines. So what we did is we did like the material flow analysis, which I shared a while ago, the different data or the different findings. And then our next step is to really reach out to these high-level policymakers so that they get to see the baselines, they get to see the data that is already available at the national level. And what we want is to promote or to communicate to the public, to the businesses, and of course to the policy, to the other relevant stakeholders, the importance of EPR, what it is, and what will the role be in the event that it will be implemented in the Philippines. So right now we are in the process of finalizing a study, a scheme assessment, to assess if EPR is really applicable in the Philippines and what would be the scheme that would be applicable and how do we implement it in the next few years. So yeah.
Great. Thank you, Czarina, for that. And perhaps, Janet, could you share on your take on this plastic circular economy and the relevant business model?
Sure. So I think the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has this beautiful butterfly diagram that shows us the inner loop business models going to the outer loop. So the very first priority is to extend the lifespan of products and to more intensively use the ones we have. So that's really looking at repair systems, multifunctionality. If you've got a product, use it more often. In fashion, we also promote having that capsule wardrobe that you can wear over and over again to a lot of different places. Then the second, and there are some businesses, like there's an e-commerce platform called buymeonce.com, which is all about those products that last forever and won't end up in the waste system. The second one is the share economy system, and that can either be P2P or B2P, and the difference is who owns the product. And so if you're peer-to-peer, the ownership can transfer from you to another person, and there's a cutoff point between that. So things like eBay, or in our region, Mercari is the app. That's endogenous to, let's say, to our region. It's a multi-billion. It's the Japan's first unicorn startup was a share economy one called Mercari. But it can also be a share system where multiple users share the same product while the owner is a service provider or a retailer. So that's like clothing rental, bike rental, car share, etc. And so those are really the preferences. Now, when it comes to disposables, we're now seeing cup share emerge. In Vietnam, we have Aya Cup. In Singapore, we have Bear Pack. So those ones are trying to, basically it's a chip in the cup, and then you use NFP technology, and then you kind of rent the cup and instead of disposing of it. And I think that's interesting. And then we're also seeing, I think, Thailand and Singapore, there's also mattress rental for hotels, so that the ownership stays with the mattress producer and they can bring it back at the end of life instead of the hotel, putting it into the waste management system. So those are some things that I think those business models are ones that we really need to support. Beyond that, it's the more traditional form of circular economy. So things like refurbishing or remanufacturing, so using the components of a product in a different way once they're not useful anymore, or recycling, when you're now rendering your product merely a bunch of materials. So you lose all the technical value of the product and it simply becomes metals and plastics. And it's also, I guess, the lowest form of circular economy, but still obviously a vital thing. I think Youna and a few others, Shima also mentioned the very exciting area of alternative materials that are either bio-based, so they can go back to the environment safely. So I think that's also a very interesting way where you design out the pollution and the waste from the products to begin with. So those are the key ones that I think are quite exciting and in need of support by us.
Okay. Thank you, Janet. Thanks for that. Jacqueline, perhaps you could tell us more about the Malaysian Plastic Circular Economy Roadmap and the key takeaways from the Circular City Week 2019.
Oh, okay, sure. Regarding the Circular Economy Roadmap for Malaysia, I believe that it was presented at the APEC's 15th Policy Partnership on Science, Technology and Innovation meeting at Putrajaya in February this year. So it really complements the existing Malaysia's roadmap towards zero single-use plastics from 2018 to 2030. So in summary, the Malaysian government has shared that it is important to embed the circular economy solutions to be part of the big picture strategy in formulating and creating synergies between the environment and economic goals for the benefit of the citizens in Malaysia. There is also a need to keep the products and materials flow circulating and its value retention by improving the waste stream practices, where cities with key industry players continue to promote regenerative resources and keep these materials in the loop as long as possible, thereby, creating a sustainable urban metabolism across the country. It is also an opportunity to offer new pathways to mitigate risk, to allow business to thrive, grow, and diversify locally and regionally. I recall that to achieve that, they have 6 key strategies and approaches, and that is multi-governance or inter-ministry collaboration and micro-level collaboration in implementing the circular economy as a new industrial paradigm. They would like to spread visionary and practical practices in the improvements of waste management and recycling, also the changing of the end-of-pipe approach to waste management, implement impactful smart regulations, which the other experts have covered. I think one of the key ones is applying the circular economy on a city scale, and that is creating the smart cities which are needed in the face of rapid urbanization. And lastly, I think Malaysia plans to strengthen the green finance system to support the circular economy progress in Malaysia as well. As for the key takeaways from the Circular Cities Week of 2019, it is a flagship event of the Circular Economy Club that coincides with the United Nations World Cities Day every year on 31st October. So in 2019, we had 80 cities participating, including Kuala Lumpur and Petaling Jaya. I'll give you a snapshot. of the top challenges and the top opportunities that the ATCTs have actually collated as a team. They feel that for most countries or for most cities, the benefits of circular economy is still unclear. There is a lack of incentives for companies and consumers. Not enough training being conducted among producers, for example, and there's still an increasing amount of disposables and plastic packaging, as well as intense water and energy consumption. However, top opportunities have also been identified, and that is, policies and procurement that could incentivize circulation. And I think this is really important if we want to create a circular plastics economy in Malaysia or anywhere else. We have to, as the other experts on the panel have actually emphasized, is to leverage on big data, blockchain, AI, and robotics, provide transparency of environmental impacts across the supply chain, create markets for products or waste, and also to encourage rental or leasing. So I think, after identifying the top challenges and opportunities, they felt that the top sectors that can actually start mobilizing this would be the fashion and textiles, where I used Repack case study as an example. Built environment is one. Food and beverage, tourism and agriculture. And why? I think it's because plastics is widely used in these top sectors. And the other sectors that should really come on board was, of course, packaging, plastics and metals, manufacturing, tech. And that's a few of the things that I could share with you from Circular City Speak.
Great, thanks for that sharing, Jacqueline. Youna, could you please sum up the major gap now on CPE type of holistic research in Southeast Asia? What about the competing research of the donors and their priority on the Southeast Asia? Or perhaps how can we bring all parts of research in this region cohesively and coordinated and in a shared basis?
That's quite a subtopic, isn't it? What is the magic bullet? I'm afraid there's none, but so there's actually exactly, there's a lot of donors and there's all kinds of donors. So there's public donors at very high level, at regional level that work with regional organization, at national levels, in the industry. There's private funds, you have hybrid public-private funds. So there's really a whole lot. And in fact, so that's, in terms of those that are regionally, because they are at local levels, there are also a number, and they work. I agree, Shima made that point earlier, that the solutions have to be local, and I couldn't agree more. We need a mixture of both, but the solutions are local because the solutions are with people. And so we need to get to that scale and to that level. And that's why also I was talking about granularity, because all the averages that we give at global level or regional level are in fact wrong when you start looking at local level. But so we, as part of the work that we've been doing at NUS and with colleagues in the region, it's really an inventory of all the players. And so we've done a first report last year, but we finished another one now, which will be released to countries of COPSI, the coordinating body on the seas of East Asia, very soon, for a meeting they're having at the end of this month. And then it will be live on our website, which is an inventory of all the science that's been done, as well as the legal and policy activities. It's huge. The report is very big, but we've broken it into small parts with keywords, etc., so that it's easy to search. And so that will be a way to access both the donors that are active in the region, as well as the different fora of discussions, etc. And if I may, there's just one more point, I think, that has not come up. We haven't talked about microplastics, although we've alluded to it a few times. And I think this, in the context of all these discussions in the circular economy, both governments and businesses need to keep an eye on what the science is telling us, because there's a whole lot that we are discovering today. So for instance, we didn't know until very recently that there is more microplastic than there is macroplastic. So the finer we sample in the sediments and in the water column, the smaller the plastic we're looking for. And then the total mass of what we find is going to be greater than the bigger bits that we have found. And that's actually a really, really important reality. It is a bit frightening, because it's a lot harder to trace really small stuff. But I think these are important elements in order to inform the circular economy discussion. Great. And I will not take more time as we're running out of time anyway.
Yes, I totally agree on that point as well, because the plastics over here, we have in 3 categories. One is land-based, as you said, of macroplastics. Then we move on to the plastics at the ocean. So we have land-based plastics, we have plastics in the ocean, and we also have microplastics to deal with. All right. So perhaps the holistic approach or the circular economy approach now here have to cover all angles or all these to address all these such kind of plastics in various streams, polluting the environment as well. Now, moving on, we only left with about 5 minutes over here. Now, perhaps I would like to recap or also to conclude with some more points that when we look at strategies that being taken by the governments and even by the industries, is whereby from various countries in Southeast Asia, I can see that only the major players, only the MNCs are actually taking the step forward. And the majority of mainly, so lots of SMEs, the small, medium enterprises, are also dealing with packaging, etc. So how are we moving forward to engage with these SMEs, all right? Because they cover about 60 to 80% of the market share as well. Now, on the other part here is we also have plastics on branded and non-branded. All right, those packaging that is branded and non-branded. Now, we also have issues and challenges when it comes to FMCG SUPs that derives from FMCG packaging, because those sectors or plastics sectors that comes from perhaps electrical electronics and automotive parts and etc. is actually easy to be solved. And it is easy actually to be collected and recycled. But what we are facing, the biggest challenge here, that is actually polluting the environment, it is the packaging that derives or comes from the FMCG packaging most of the time. Now, how are the industry is moving forward or moving ahead on this additional packaging, on the eco design that they're going to come out with? Are they reducing on the amount of packaging that they are moving ahead on this, and how is the rigid and the films are moving on the injection molding, or whether it is a blow molding kind of technology is moving towards that. So we have the entire supply chain. We have the front part of it to also solve with together with the industry players and the stakeholders and the policymakers. At the same time, or the end part is where the coming up with the research, and then we have the technologies to solve this part, and also to connect the dots in between, which is the collection and the supply of these materials. Dr. Shima, how do you, in one word, do you look at this entire ecosystem when it comes to entrepreneurship, innovation, technology, and so on?
Vibrant is what it needs, what it needs to be, and it is growing at the moment. Is all the different players. It's not a single player. The different players need to come together for us to see true innovation and innovations flourishing.
Great. How about you? How about you, Jacqueline? We can't hear you.
Hi, sorry about that, Dr. Sri. In my opinion, I think that, for the Malaysian domestic companies, right, for them to thrive and to further innovate and come up with creative and impactful footprints in Malaysia is they need to know how to do three things within their company itself. They have to start measuring and assessing to understand the baseline of their current use, recovery, recycling, or use of recycled content in their products, so that the organization can be better equipped to make important and significant gains on plastic pollution reduction, resource recovery, and reuse of materials. If they can start doing that with the help of key international donors who are implementing various projects, like Janet, for example, with her ASEAN project, they could really start going circular and enter the circular economy and efficiently reuse and recover their materials. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. So we are about to the end of this session of webinar. I would like to thank all of you all for your time, and also to the viewers for supporting with questions and so on. There are Basel Convention rules that is also coming up on the region to region or importation of plastic waste or exportation of plastic waste, etc., coming up on that as well. And thanks to Blue Hope for such a wonderful session. And till we meet again, thank you very much and have a good evening.